UK. But we're also subject to the EC Copyright Directive, which specifies that you may not break the DRM on any piece of digital output for any purpose. So if somebody can protect a digital artifact so that your tools can't work with it, you're legally prohibited from breaking that so that you can do the thing that's allowed in UK law. And I have this problem in an English department because we want to digitally study novels that are not available in digital forms we can use. So we saw the spine off the book, run it through a feed scanner, OCR the text, so that we can do our digital stuff on it. And that's legal, but it's not legal for us to run a simple script that would hack the DRM off Amazon's Kindle file. So we have the same problem in research, that people are developing ecosystems that are not amenable to the type of new text mining, data mining approaches that are coming out. We also know that Wikipedia is one of the most brilliant sources in the world and sometimes one of the most terrible. And it varies hugely on who you ask and what article they're looking at as to what they say about that. But it doesn't vary if you ask a room of people. If you want to learn something new about a topic you've never seen before and you Googled it, what do you think the top result will be, and would you have a look? And it's Wikipedia usually. So millions of people are visiting a website that is edited by a bunch of volunteers primarily who do not have access to high quality scholarly material. And if we want to think about that civic duty for the humanities, we need work that can be given to people writing Wikipedia articles, that they can cite beyond the provisions of fair use or fair dealing, and that could be improved to actually help with general education, rather than thinking this is a place where cat videos and nonsense are spewed, we don't want our work anywhere near it. And lastly, and I'm going to show you a demonstration of some software we've built on this later, I think about issues of language and translation and the legacy of the British Empire in particular. It seems completely clear to me that English is the dominant language in the world because we've behaved very well for many, many years. But we've had post-colonial discourses for over 50 years now, and it's maintained its status as the dominant language in scholarly communications. And if you're outside of that, you're simply not allowed to participate. It doesn't strike me as a great way to proceed to then stop people from translating this when there's no market to pay someone to translate it. So I like to think about how we might break down linguistic barriers by allowing people to do more with our work. And so we're thinking through these problems and coming up against them as academics, and open access is really gaining some movement around this time in the early 2010s. By open access, just to clarify, we mean peer-reviewed research that's freely available to read and reuse online. Gold open access means the publisher does it. It doesn't mean any particular business model, it just means that the publisher needs a way of paying for what it's doing that isn't charging subscriptions. Green open access means the researcher publishes wheresoever they like and abide by the policies of the publisher, but can usually, about 96% of cases in the last ref, deposit their accepted manuscript at least in an institutional or subject repository. We have two terms around permissiveness: gratis, meaning the work is just free to read, which is better than nothing, but libre, meaning the work is also free to reuse. This is the geekiest of my slides, I think, but those are the basic terms that we're using here. So we thought, great, we could do something like this in the humanities. We look at the Public Library of Science, PLOS, and we think, wouldn't it be brilliant if we had something like this where our researchers could publish? And then we start talking to researchers about their constraints. And it's clear that there are a lot of fears around open access in the humanities, some justified, some less so. But the number one thing we kept coming back to was that PLOS's business model of article processing charges just is not going to fly in the humanities disciplines and some social science spaces. And the reason for that is that most humanities research work is unfunded in terms of not having an external funder. So in the UK, you may know this, HEFCE provides QR funding, quality-related research funding, to institutions that allows them to give researchers, hopefully, a day per week when they can go to the library, if that's what they're doing, do their research where it doesn't require a huge lab space. What HEFCE doesn't do is give you £1,700 per article that you publish, so you can give that to Taylor and Francis so they can make it open access. And that is one of the dominant business models of open access gold publishers. So this is a graph of English departments across the UK. It's very blurry and it's quite small, sorry, but I'll tell you what it's saying so that you can have a look. And this figure is a small English department in the Midlands of the UK, of which I'm very, very sure of the figures I'm using. This is a medium-sized one estimated from conversations with libraries, and this is just a scaled-up one that I just inflated and made up, but I'm guessing, given the budgets of the institution, it's probably about right for a larger institution. These are tiny budgets, actually, we're talking about in the humanities here for purchasing, but nonetheless, the blue bar indicates what they pay in 5 yearly annual subscriptions at the moment for access to their journals. It's not much money we're talking here. This is the £120,000 mark for the biggest institution, down to the £20,000 mark for the smallest one. It's not great to work there for access to research, by the way. What I then model are various levels of article processing charge based on the number of researchers that they returned to the last ref, assuming that each researcher put in 4 articles to the ref at various levels of pricing. So the orange bar is actually a very generous £1,500 APC. So that's less than Taylor and Francis article processing charge, for example. And then I've modelled down different scenarios down to a very, very cheap, £400. Ubiquity Press can do it cheaper than that. We've got Tommaso in the room, so I feel obliged to say this. But nonetheless, what you can see here is that the point at which what they're spending already would be less for an APC is a very low amount. And in any transition phase, it would not be that you move from that to one of these. It would be that you add that on top of there. And good luck finding a university administrator who's happy about adding 2 budgets together and saying, yeah, we'll pay that for the meantime while everyone else does nothing. It just doesn't fly well. So we started polling people, as a humanities researcher, how much money could you get for an article processing charge? Would £200 work? And pretty much everyone said, no way, I can't get £200. I don't think they tried very hard, just for the record, because I've gone to my library director several times and managed to get quite a lot more than that out of him. But there was a problem emerging systematically. This idea that they had funds they could draw on to pay was not in place. And then they were using this to say, yeah, and open access is all about paying in this way and we can't do it. So maybe we should just drop the whole idea and these problems aren't really problems and you're making it up and we can just hide and it'll all be fine. I wasn't convinced by that particularly. We also had this problem of books, which are really important in the humanities, and they are in many ways culturally and artifactually different to a journal article. So in the years of development of open access, we've come to a kind of pricing consensus. There have been several studies at least that have shown what it costs to publish an article in terms of marginal and fixed costs. The monographs are acknowledged as different, and their prices are hugely different as well, and the types of labour that go into them. So in most mandates, monographs are excluded from open access provisions, except for the Wellcome Trust and a few others. The Wellcome Trust have enough money to be able to do it, so good on them. I'm glad they do, but we can't afford to be paying £16,000 per monograph in my department. We really cannot afford that. But I think books are different for a different reason, which is how they're bought and commissioned and disseminated. So when you're buying a journal, what you do is you look at the past performance of that journal and say, were these articles useful? Were they high quality? Did we use them in teaching? Did we use them in research? If so, we will buy the next year of that journal not knowing what its contents is going to be. It's speculative in a subscription environment. With books, we expect publishers to take the risk in commissioning a work. And they take on the risk of the peer review process and do we think we can sell enough copies of this to cover our labour and any surplus or profit? Then they go to libraries and say, which books do you want to buy? So the risk has been transferred, in that case, from the library risking the next 12 months not knowing what it is, to the publisher saying, we're risking we can sell enough copies of this. Now, it might be that there's a way of changing that model of buying books so that it works more like a journal, but it doesn't exist at the moment, so it's a kind of cultural problem of purchasing. We also have trade crossover books. So actually, having an author's accepted manuscript version of a book on an institutional repository might not be the best way of getting maximum dissemination for a book. You might also need to have a hard copy of it in the front of Waterstones with your TV series and your tie-in radio program because you're a popular historian, etc. And that will bring more attention. Now, I'm not saying that having the open access version wouldn't be good there, but it might not be sufficient on its own for the type of people who are interested in reading books about popular history, for example. There's also a series of technical issues we can talk about around platforms and typesetting and production tool chains for this work. So I'm now going to tell you a bit about what we've built and how it's gone in the first year to try and address some of these problems. We haven't solved books yet. If anyone knows how to do that, please come tell me. I'm very open to hearing it, but it strikes me as a very hard problem. And what we built over this year is a mega journal and a multi-journal platform on a not-for-profit basis. We're a charitable company limited by guarantee that is collectively funded. And we basically just made it up as we went along. That's kind of the important thing to say here, and the thing that I now feel very conservative about when people ask me this. Because I get probably about 3 or 4 emails a week from people saying, I'd really like to set up an open access journal. Can you tell me what I should do? And I say, maybe you need to leave that to someone else. But that wasn't what I did when I started. We just ploughed in and thought we could do it, not really knowing enough. And if we had known enough, we wouldn't have done it because it would have been too scary. So there's a real tension there between when you've done it, warning others away from trying to do it, and at the time thinking it was just a great idea. So I'm probably not the best person to advise on whether, if you wanted to do something like this, you should. It's pretty life-consuming though, that's what I will say. Don't expect much free time if you did want to do something similar. So we started planning this on the 7th of January 2013 when I just put up a website saying, who wants to build something like PLOS in the humanities? Is anyone interested in that? Send me an email or have a Twitter discussion. And it went kind of crazy with 200 emails in the next day or so. Which was great. And lots of people were just saying, yeah, it's a good idea, you should do that. Which was kind of, good to have support, but more helpful with a stream of people who got in touch saying, yeah, we've been thinking about this for a long time. We'd like to have a proper discussion about this and a conversation around what needs to be different and what we could be done to fix it. So we had people willing to participate in that discussion that ranged from Michael Eisen, one of the founders of PLOS, but a scientist completely outside the realm of the humanities, through to Kathleen Fitzpatrick, chair of the Modern Language Association Scholarly Communications Efforts, Margaret Avery, a publisher at MIT Press, Wellcome Trust funders, profs at Stanford and Harvard. It was a very interesting set of people who wanted to be involved in the conversation. And we got loads of people to write about in the media as well, which was a great start. And don't underestimate self-promotion as a really important tool. It's great. People think we're so much bigger than we are just because the media has this amplificatory effect. I probably shouldn't be saying all this because it's being live streamed, but it's all right, open honesty in practice. And then we were discussing all this openly, and we were putting the minutes of what we were doing up openly, and we were trying to embody those principles. And the Mellon Foundation, who are well known for helping scholarly communications in the humanities greatly, got in touch and said, could you drop by our offices in New York? And we were based at the University of Lincoln at the time, which wasn't right next door to New York, and did not have a huge travel budget for speculative grant conversations with funders. But I did manage to get a coffee with the Vice Chancellor who said, yeah, we can do this. We'll send you to New York. And we told them what we were thinking, and we told them about the new funding model I'm going to tell you about. And they said, right, okay, so you want a lot of money to do this, to get you off the ground. Why don't we give you a bit of money so you can see whether it can work and have a year to plan? We got a planning grant from them. And then we got a much larger grant to actually get this off the ground. Although still a relatively small amount of money for an idea for a big platform. It's worth saying. We're very grateful to them, of course, but actually the single year's profit of Elsevier dwarfs what we're having to work with. So actually we're under a set of tight constraints for what we can do, how fast we can scale, and not kill ourselves in the process. But here we are back to my libraries, toilet, signs thinking. And this is what the current model looks like in very crass terms. Many, many libraries, all paying relatively large sums, but we put a barrier there. And this is a classical economic model. The idea behind the stop sign is that if you take that away, people say, then libraries won't pay because why should they? Because everyone's going to get it anyway. So why should we be the ones who pay? And we came up with a set of hypotheses around why this logic isn't right for libraries in certain situations. And the logic was that if you're not paying a huge amount out of your budget and you're a library that wants to encourage open access to materials, and you've been doing interlibrary loan already, because that's what libraries do, so if someone down the road asks you for a copy, you'll post it to them, maybe this classical thinking doesn't hold so well. And we thought, instead of asking for article processing charges, which concentrate the cost on a single person, Can we make this look like a subscription, but we make everything open access? Can we get 300 libraries to all pay relatively large, small sums out of their budgets year on year in order to just underwrite the labour we have to do in publishing so that we make it openly accessible? We came up with a snazzy name for it. We called it the Library Partnership Subsidy. It wasn't the snappiest title ever, but we needed a name, and that's what came after several sleepless nights of buzzing with excitement. And we thought also, well, we could give some exclusive perks here. We could give the libraries participating a governance stake in what we're doing. And that proves to be quite tricky. I suspect Cameron has some thoughts on this. But the idea is still, libraries vote when journals come to us for admission to the platform. Technically what they're voting for is to spend more money with us the next year. But they do get the right to say no. And if a significant portion of them say no, we won't take a journal. So there's kind of a bit more library control there. The challenge is as you get more and more libraries, are they having less and less say? Does that perk become smaller? How do you manage an online vote of 350 institutions? What does it mean? It's like a Brexit referendum where you actually only have 37% of the population saying yes, but we'll treat that as a mandate because of the portion who voted, it was 52. Where do you draw the line on what you can do without inciting outrage among the other 50%? And it went pretty well in the first year though, which was good because there was a time when I wasn't sleeping at all and we were thinking this is never going to work and Mellon are going to kill us and so forth. But actually we've got over 200 libraries now. We're at 209 institutions who are giving us on average just over $1,000 each. So we have about a $200,000 turnover and we have 2 members of staff at the moment. And we pay an article processing charge to Ubiquity Press per article. Now, ideally, 300 to 350 libraries really lets us do what we want to do at the scale we want. But what was quite encouraging was that the libraries that joined went from the really small ones like Cambridge, Harvard, King's, Duke, Carnegie Mellon, etc., right up to massive, tiny theological colleges in the States. It was a very diverse range, and we worked out how to band this so that institutions could participate. And actually, to this day, I get librarians coming to me saying, is there any room for negotiation? And the answer is yes. Traditionally, that negotiation goes, actually, it's not that much, is it? We'll just give you the whole amount anyway. But we're more willing to try and negotiate on price so that institutions can participate. Because it's about the distribution, not the single fee from a single place. If you can get loads of people to give you a small amount of money, you have enough essentially to do what you want. So we now have 18 journals that are on or supported by the platform. We published 909 articles across that in the first year. So some of those were back catalogue import if you're trying to do a costing estimate of how much it cost us, so they weren't the full fee that we were paying per article. But if you do some dodgy maths on this, you come up with some great quotable statistics that we can use here. So the cost per institution per article was around $1.10, which is a lot better than £1,700 per article. Now, of course, I'll tell you why that's a dodgy statistic, is because it's not the same as an article processing charge. It's more like a subscription, working out the cost of ownership there across each institution. We had 118,686 unique readers, whatever that means, in the first year. All these metrics are kind of dodgy, and I dislike them because they're used to beat us academics into the ground. And I am a research-active academic. I don't like this metricization, but people keep asking for it, so we have some statistics. A unique reader is counted as somebody who visited the platform that we hadn't seen before according to identifiable parameters of their browser, and they stayed on the site for at least 20 seconds. So that's an average of 131 readers per article, which is pretty damn good actually, for very niche, often humanities work. Now it's not evenly distributed, a bit like William Gibson's Future. What we have is some that have thousands of hits and some that have 1 or 2, and that's usually the case. But this is my favourite, if you break this down as the price per institution per reader that they each paid, it's $0.008 US per institution per reader, which I don't think is that high a price to pay for this material to be out there. So economic efficiency arguments and metricization all in one slide. What more could you want? But I want to come back to these social challenges of prestige, proxy measures, and how we judge research, because this is what is really key to us. And it hasn't quite worked as brilliantly as we'd like so far, but we're working now to actively address this. So, scholarly communications is not a build it and they will come situation. You can build the best new technological platform in the world and people won't give a damn because it doesn't look like what their communities think is worthwhile and they don't think they'll get credit for working within those parameters. What we have to do is to find a way to make what people are doing open access without researchers having to fundamentally change their paradigm to new ways of paying, to publishing in new venues. So we're working on ongoing projects to flip existing subscription journals to an open access mode, almost without researchers realizing what we're doing. So we had some successes with this. 6 of the journals on our platform used to be subscription journals and they aren't anymore. They're on our model. From 2017, next year, we're not letting any journals come onto the platform that weren't previously subscription. Now there's some perverse incentives there. Does that mean that if you want to start a new journal, you don't come to us, you go to Taylor & Francis for 8 years, then you come to us to bail you out? While Taylor & Francis, yet again, lock people into their library purchasing, etc. But we can't see a way in the short term around the fact that we need to start seeing offsetting from library budgets for what we're doing. We're asking for them to pay, we need libraries to see a reduction in their subscriptions so they can divert it into open access. And that's complicated by the fact that libraries purchase en bloc. They get big deal subscriptions that when a journal is dropped out of that, they just put 2 others in it and go to the library and say, well, the price has to go up, there are more journals than last year. What did you expect? The price of a big deal negotiation has never gone down as a result of that kind of negotiation, and it is difficult for us to see how to do it. Other than, we've got 200 libraries, all on a mailing list. Can we coordinate some of these negotiations? Can we work out how to get that to work? So this is just a slide about the Linguistics and Open Access Foundation that we're working with. So they have an interim bridge fund to do exactly this, to flip journals in linguistics from subscription mode to open access. Their biggest success story was the Elsevier journal Glossa, Lingua. Get this right around. I'll tell you why, this is funny in a minute. Lingua, the Elsevier journal, the entire editorial board resigned simultaneously and came to set up a new journal with the name Glossa. Those are the same term in Italian and Greek respectively, which is why it's a joke and why I mixed it up. And this got huge media coverage. Elsevier continues to run Lingua, but we got a signed statement from Noam Chomsky and many other leading linguists around the world saying they didn't regard that journal as valid anymore and they would publish in the new venue. So that's what you can do when a publisher owns the name of a title. But actually, we're also thinking about working with publishers in this respect. You're not going to get at scale that kind of resignation. It's a kind of one-off event where you can get people to resign and set up a new title, and that's exciting. But that's not going to change things at scale. So what about mission-driven publishers, like smaller university presses, who want to open access but really don't have the resources or the idea of how to do it? Could we be a way of underwriting the costs that they bear? And could we just basically say, we'll run a subscription handling service for you so long as you're open access? We've got the credibility, we've got the consortium of the willing here today. So University of Wales Press, for example, was our first venture into this. They had a journal that wanted to leave their platform and come to be Open Library of Humanities published. And we sort of felt a bit bad for University of Wales Press, who are not trying to do evil things and make masses of profit. They're trying to do good things, but they're under-resourced. And we said, well, why don't we work out whether we can do this economically to fund that journal, to stay with you, to keep your brand, to keep what you do well. This is a journal of Welsh writing, so perhaps University of Wales Press knows something about this if we don't. Then we don't have to do the work of publishing it, but we can fund you to be open access. And the libraries voted, 91% of those who voted were in favour of, I think, that journal coming on board. So that was a pretty easy sell, actually, with a very strong mandate. And so we're also now looking at other university presses and saying, is there a section of your list we could think about flipping in this way? Because once you start doing blocks like that, you've actually got some momentum and something that could work at a larger scale. And now I appreciate we're in a kind of computer science department, I think, here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the open source publishing technology that we've developed, and then I'm going to stop talking so that we can have a discussion and or go to the pub. But basically we have 3 core technological developments we're working on at the moment. The first is an automated JATS XML typesetter that, if I'm going to be completely honest, is never likely to function brilliantly in every circumstance. It's currently at a stage where if you give it good input, you get good output. If you put garbage in, you get garbage out, as usual in computer programming. But essentially, this takes an unstructured Microsoft Word document and tries to convert it into a semantically rich XML document. It doesn't work brilliantly when people say draw a table using line drawing tools in Word. In fact, it works terribly, but we have test case manuscripts where people have done that. So I think any typesetter would probably balk at that when they came to it and trying to deal with it. We did at one point try and get around that problem by running an instance of the word processor in the background, taking a screenshot of it, and then trying to do OCR to work out whether we could pass a table that was drawn in this way. We decided that's insane. There is no way we should spend our time doing this. But in other cases of simple textual work, say in literary studies, this works brilliantly to get you a basic XML skeleton in about 15 seconds that then takes you about a further 3 minutes to get the cleanup done. So there is potential there. More exciting, and what is actually working, Cassius, our CSS regions PDF generator, and a translation layer that can actually plug into any website using the Hypothesis framework. I'm going to just show you a couple of things around those now. So Cassius, which is a joke because it's a CSS typesetter, so it's usually that's supposed to be uncapitalized, and then we can have our little Muhammad Ali joke in there as well, is a CSS Regions 3 based typesetter. CSS Regions is an experimental browser technology. I'm just going to see if I can zoom in on this a little bit. That says that you can specify a region within an HTML document. So what we have here is, actually this is a screenshot, but what I've done is I've specified an A4 size page region as the main page layout. And then I've specified within this different regions between which I've said text should flow. This has come straight from an XML document, completely automatically, with no interference from me. And as you can see, we've actually got a set of pages here that look pretty professional on a typesetting basis for this article, which is one we published in the lecture this year. It handles graphs, it handles tables, and it's a lot better than somebody messing about for half an hour in Adobe InDesign, for example, to do that flow. Because what lots of people have tried to do over the years is an XML First Workflow, and they've pretty much unambiguously failed. What people are doing when they're typesetting scholarly articles is you give them your Word document, they're marking it up in Word using a thing called X styles usually. Then they're going to flow this into Adobe InDesign to create a PDF that goes back to the author. Then they make the changes in the Word document again. Then they create the PDF again, and then they create the XML, the semantically rich version at the end. We thought, well, we're doing this work, we could create the XML relatively easily. Can we then get to a PDF from that and not bother with this template? We know lots of designers who can work with HTML and CSS. Why don't we use this approach? Because then we can actually hire people to do it. We don't know that many people who are great at InDesign. Alternative technologies like FOP are hard to hire people for. Maybe this is a good way to go. So that's quite exciting, and that's all open source and is actually working as of this point. We haven't yet dared to transfer a journal onto it, for fear of them saying we've wrecked their PDFs, but we're going to start in tandem to our production procedure at the moment, trying to produce these and then start doing A/B testing where one set gets it, the other doesn't, and see what they say with feedback on this. But that's sort of over the next couple of years we're planning that. We then have built something to translate websites. Ernesto, do we have sound on this? I'm going to try and play you a really embarrassing video where I talk over it. It's just 5 minutes and then I'm going to stop permanently. But this, it's bigger. Prefab, here's one I made earlier, but this is what we've done with this. I can tell you briefly how it works.
Hello, my name is Martin Eve, and today I'll be giving you a demonstration of the translation software that we've been building along with my colleague Maria Kadic at the Open Library of Humanities. For those of you who aren't familiar with what we're doing, we've built a system for translating any web page that is based on the Hypothesis annotation framework. Hypothesis is a web application that can plug into any web page and store annotations, keyed to locations on the page. We decided that this would be a good way of writing translations for web pages, since we can key the user's translation of any sentence to the original sentence on the web page. So, how does it work? We've put together a test page here to demonstrate the tool in action. As you can see, there's a link at the top of the page that says, translate this page. This could also be triggered by a bookmarklet in the user's browser. We've here put a link, as we would do on a scholarly communications platform. When you click this link, the Anatran sidebar loads, and you're presented with something that looks a bit like, but is actually very different from, the hypothesis application. The first thing to note here is that there is a language list at the top of the page. This now lets us move through languages for which there are translations on a page. Below, where the star ratings are, there's a list of users who have translated the page. We'll come back to that shortly. Anyway, let us imagine that I want to write a translation of this nonsensical Latin example page into English. The first thing I need to do, of course, is to log in. Once that is done, I need to add the language English to the page. Once this is done, because I want to move through the page in order, I'm going to enable our sentence-by-sentence mode for editing. So, let me write a translation here for all to see. As you can see, I move sentence by sentence through the page. You get the idea. Okay, so you probably get the idea by now of how this all works. What happens when we go to view this, though? We're just going to sign out to demonstrate what this looks like to other users. So when I come to the page and I've selected English as my language as opposed to the others, I can see the translation listed there by a user called Martin. When I click this user, ta-da! The translations that I created are substituted into the page in real time so that you can read them in line in the page itself. If you hover your mouse over the translation, you can see the original text has been replaced by the substitution. So this is how translation works here. However, we also appreciate that translations might want to be restricted in their visibility. That's why there's a group and privacy system for annotations. At the moment, this translation in English was in the public group. However, it's possible to have private groups and to invite others to join those groups. So here's our private group test. We could actually add translation here in English. And this will now only be visible to users who are members of that group. And if I sign out, I can't select the test group. Can't find it in the back end. I can see the original translation in English and not the one that was in the private group. So what happens if a translation isn't very good though? Or what happens if we get spammed or somebody actually has an idea to abuse the platform? Well, we've got some ideas for that too. Users can rate other users' translations. So when I log in as a user other than Martin, I'm looking as Martin2, I can click on this star rating and I can select, say, a 3-star rating for this translation. That is live when we get the average of all votes across all users in that star display. Or I can report this translation as abusive, which will send a report to an administrator who can then act to remove it. And that's the basics of what we've built. Stand by for a future post or video on what we've done to the original JavaScript, CoffeeScript, Python, and Elasticsearch from Hypothesis. We're also planning at some point soon to release a public alpha version for those who would like to help us test the software or to find bugs. You can find the full code base for what we've built on GitHub at github.com/birkbeck/anatran. We hope this was of interest. Thank you very much.
And that's what we've done in the first year. And I hope it's been of interest. Thank you very much.